All right, everybody, I'd like to invite you all to take your seat here for our keynote presentation here at the Planet MicroCap Showcase Vegas 2023. Drew has been an incredible supporter of our event and everything that we do, and we really enjoy hearing all of his insights. And he's here to share some of those with you today. So with that, Drew Bernstein from MarcumAsia. Welcome.
Thank you, Bobby. Let me just begin with, this is Bobby. This is number 9 for you, right? So next year is your 10th anniversary. Now, I just want to start by beginning to thank, Bobby and your mom, Lulu, and Shelly for having me back. I think you're going to have a wonderful celebration next year. I hope you invite me back for your 10th annual. Okay. All right. To begin with, I have a PowerPoint presentation today. If any of you'd like, my email is at the end of it. I'm happy to share it with everybody. To start with, I do see some familiar faces in the audience. For those who don't know me, I'll take just 2 minutes and tell you who I am and why I'm here. My name is Drew Bernstein. I'm one of the co-managing partners of MarcumAsia. Over my 40-year career right now, I've spent my first 18 or so in Europe. I've spent almost my entire professional career in international markets. I spent my first 18 or so years in Europe and practically the last 25 in Asia, principally China. We opened an office in May in Singapore, so I've made several trips down to Singapore and various other countries in Southeast Asia. The title of my presentation today is principally about China, whether it's uninvestable or unavoidable. I actually took the title from some of the research I did because I found it so preposterous that people would think that way. I've always looked at China and the U.S. as sort of in this 50-year marriage. And anybody that knows people married 50 years, which is almost exactly what it's been, I found there's only 2 reasons that people married 50 years don't get divorced. The most common reason, the other person refuses to die. The second reason is because they don't want to diminish their lifestyles. And I truly believe that if China and the U.S. ever divorced or decoupled, both lifestyles would probably greatly be diminished. So I kind of use that as my title today. Over the last few years, it's certainly been in an unpredictable environment. And it's one of those risks, over my 25-year career there. It's one that I just never thought investors took seriously. And that's the concept that today, at least when I grew up, most of the economies were run by the principles of supply and demand. But today, some of the largest economies in the world are run by governments. And I think that's not a risk that a lot of the investors don't quite fully understand. And what we see here, basically, for me, is sort of an old analogy, the stool that has 4 legs. Well, that's kind of how China operates. It's like a stool with 4 legs. And the first leg, and I chose these over here as examples because each of one of these cases represents one of the legs. Alibaba, we saw. Ant Financial. Well, that was all about banking because that's one of the legs, being able to control the banking system. Alibaba, well, that's one of the other legs. They like to control how companies compete. DD, all about data security. Education, social welfare. Those are the 4 legs. Anytime your company impedes on one of those, well, then you have risk of government involvement because that affects China. Zero COVID policy had a great effect on China, where it is today. I've listed here some of the most obvious results of it. I haven't been to China in 3 years. I'm actually going next week, but for the last few months. I've been actually meeting my staff in Macau because it's the only place that we both could get into because of visa issues. And it's had a lot of other effects because China now produces some of the most highly educated people. And putting those people to work productively is becoming a challenge. You know, this one I love because I actually did an interview in Hong Kong a couple of weeks ago, and the interviewer actually brought it up. I thought it was so unusual for him to do that. But, you know, all these headlines that you're reading in the newspaper about China, most of them are all written by people that haven't been there in 3 years, which I find kind of interesting. And there's this incredible disconnect between what you may read in headlines here and what you read in headlines in Asia. This certainly has been the resultant mood over the last 18 months to 2 years. 73%, the guy dropped, and even Bain was predicting this. Things have changed now in China, though. China's open now. COVID lockdowns are done. There has been monetary credit easing. Interest rates there are only maybe 2% right now. They've declared 2023 of the year as foreign investment. You've seen a lot of regulatory reforms, which I'm going to go through quickly. COVID, even though China is open, we're still not really seeing the effects of it. I mean, China was closed for 3 years where people were literally sequestered. And I was reading a recent article, Qantas right now has 12 A380s stored in the Mojave Desert. It's taking them 2 to 3 months per aircraft to get it ready to fly, 4,500 man hours. So in me, even going on my trip to China, there's virtually no flights right now. So it's going to be a while. Aviation industry in China will probably take over a year before they're able to be up and running. And I think what you're going to see, just like we did in the United States, you're going to see the Chinese spending money, a lot of money, particularly in things like travel, luxury goods, all the kind of things we've seen here. And there is a very bullish outlook right now because the population in China is aging. The amount of population over 55 years old in China right now is over 60%. That number in Indonesia is 35. So you're seeing this transitioning right now to a more service economy to be able to provide services to these aging populations. Inflation this year in China was only 2%. And the PBOC, and for those of you that are accountants here, don't confuse this with the PBAOC, okay? This is the People's Republic of China Bank. But you see right now that based on numbers, China's doing very well right now. Very stable. China's signaled the end to the, what I call rectification phase. I've talked a lot about these companies earlier, and where they are now today, well, DD, they have their app back up. And Ant, well, they kind of split the company up a little bit, and they actually went public with Chinese approval. Tencent, NetEase, also, they got their gaming licenses. So I think this period of not understanding what the requirements are for these companies to go public has kind of neared the end. And as I said, Asian companies have a lot of choices right now. 20 years ago, if you wanted to go public from Asia, you didn't have much of a choice. Today, you have Shanghai, Hong Kong, Star, US, Singapore, lots of choices. And they all offer different things. And what we're seeing right now is that I always believed that when the regulators got together from the US and China, as much as the public didn't think that, they would get together, I always felt that if they were in a room together and nobody was looking, they'd all agree on probably everything. Because China wants to create their own system competitive with US systems. And they want markets competitive with US markets. Well, you can't do that without having integrity in the market. Otherwise, it becomes like this place, a casino. So the regulators in China actually have every desire to create a system where investors have confidence. And in order to do that, what you're seeing right now is that the systems in China and the markets are moving more closely to what I describe as a disclosure-based system like we use here in the US. And I think you're going to continue to see that. Obviously, Jack Ma's back in China after being exiled for like 7 years. So I think that we've seen these kind of issues kind of settled right now. Like I said, the government is actively trying to woo back investors. They, are saying 2023 is the year of invest in China. And I mean, I've given you a list here, I'm sorry, of some of the accomplishments. The China Development Forum, which is probably one of the largest gatherings business-wise in China, other than the People's Congress, you had people like Tim Cook there this year. So you can see that from, the mega companies right now and the unicorns, there's still a tremendous amount of interest. As we've seen, there's been major progress on this front. The fact that the PCAOB now is able to conduct inspections in China is a big hurdle. And the fact that China right now is approving IPOs for companies outside of China. I mean, I've been in China 25 years, and this will probably be the first time, that you're ever going to see an Asian company go public using a VIE structure that China approved. That'll probably take 10 to 15 pages out of a 10K disclosure, risk factors. So I think they've made major progress on this front. Now, answer the question, whether it's uninvestable or unavoidable, I figure the best way to answer that question is, based on my experiences and what I'm seeing in my practice right now, I kind of picked out 3 industries to show you how untrue I think this statement is. Automotive market, and I'm not just talking about EV. To talk about automotive right now without China sitting at the table would probably be a hard discussion. And especially when you get into the EV market, because when you look at emerging markets, particularly like Africa, South America, parts of the Middle East, I just don't see them driving Teslas. I can't tell you who they will be, but I don't think it's going to be a Tesla. They make almost all of the batteries right now for our cars. So to be without this, to delve into this sector without China is kind of hard to do. Renewable energy. And this is also something that we're seeing growing in Southeast Asia. In May, I opened an office in Singapore, and we're starting to do a lot of business in places like Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Philippines, and the kind of industries that we're seeing, things like, education, certainly in places like Indonesia, because of the demographics there, 270 million people, average per capita income, $4,000. And obviously when somebody making $4,000 doubles their income, 100% of that goes back into the economy. So we're seeing sectors like education. We're seeing sectors like consumer tech, fintech, green tech, because people in Southeast Asia feel the effects of global warming much more than anybody else in the world. So they're very attuned to that. And when you talk about solar panels, they make 80% of them right now. So kind of hard to ignore the sector. And interesting about solar, we're starting to see a lot of this popping up in places like Vietnam, because labor rates in China are high right now. And there's also tariffs on certain goods. So there's an opportunity right now for Southeast Asian companies to actually, I don't know if I'd say compete with China, but at least have a space in the market for themselves. Lastly, I took a look at the semiconductor industry. They're the largest market in the world. Almost every manufacturer right now has roots in China. Qualcomm, almost 65% of their business is coming from China. So I have a limited amount of time today, but as I tried to at least take some examples to show you that kind of hard for China to be uninvestable at this point right now. Now, to try to summarize some of what I talked about today, I've listed some key takeaways. I don't have enough time to go through them all because there's certain things I would like to cover before, and I only got a few minutes left. But these are some key takeaways. Number 3, that's something you have to get used to these days, this overhang from the news media and everything that we're seeing. I would encourage you to, look other places to get some of your news. And I kind of did this kind of comparison for you. Again, it's hard to have time to go through it all, but at least through my eyes, this is the old China. This is the new China. Very different worlds. I'm going to save a few minutes at the end to answer some questions. And again, you can have a copy of my PowerPoint. Now, this one, I understand, like coming out here, that most of you are microcap investors. So it's not about Tencent or big companies like that. I actually wanted to try to bring it down so that at least what I told you today was useful. Being a microcap investor. I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I actually, wrote some notes down so at least I can make it, at a level that what I say to you today is useful and that you can kind of learn something. And I know that I'm not an investment advisor. It's just not what I do. But so far this year, in the first quarter, about 45% of the IPOs were from Asia. And there's only 2 that I can think of right now that I consider significant that raised over 100 million. The rest were all microcaps. 10, 20, $30 million raises. So there's a lot of space there for you. And actually, I'm surprised about it because with 250 SPACs out there all sitting with money, I didn't really expect to see much in the way of IPOs. I think we're going to see a recovery in the overall IPO market. But I would expect that the number and the size of these companies seeking to list is going to dramatically increase over time. Now, when evaluating a company from China, or Southeast Asia, I think there are some fundamental questions you want to ask yourself. First, have they made an investment to be able to have high quality financial reporting? Do they have a CFO? Is he qualified? Often, the audit becomes the Achilles heel of a company going public. Second, they have to be able to clearly explain their business model and how they make money. If you're a public company and you can't clearly explain, crystal clear, how you make money, then you're not a good company. And to do that, you better, at the end of the day, own 80% of your investors' trusting. The other 20% will never like you, no matter what you do. And actually, if they hate you enough, they can create opportunities for the other 80%. But that's something you have to do. And thirdly, they have to be able to sustain profitability. It's a very fiercely competitive market out there. And in China, thousands of these companies are always ready to copy a successful business plan. So what is your moat? And most importantly, do they communicate with investors? Because that's how you earn trust, by communication. Critical. And I mean communicating good news and bad news, both. Finally, there's three things I can tell you about China, for sure. Number one thing, if you can align your business with government policy, you can make money. If you can't align your business with government policy, you will not make money. And if you're not sure if you can do that, you probably never belong there in the first place. In China, there is never a company too big to fail. I saved the sales for the end. Just a little bit about our firm. I know Neil Levine spoke yesterday, told you a little bit. I think most importantly right now, we have about 250, approaching 300 people, all based in Asia. I opened an office in May there, and we're in the process of staffing that office right now with local people. But that's kind of our strong suit. We'll also be opening this year an office in Hong Kong, which I never had. We have 5 offices in China right now. Beijing, actually one in Tianjin, Shanghai, Hangzhou, Guangzhou. And we'll open one soon in Hong Kong. In China, we actually did the most amount of IPOs, and our practice in China is larger than 2 of the big 4 right now. So, you know, we've spread our practice out to Southeast Asia. That's an important part of our growth. And, you know, what's unique about our business is that in MarcumAsia, we don't do U.S. clients. We only represent Chinese or Asian clients that are going public on the U.S. Any U.S. clients are represented by our parent company, Marcum LLP. So that's kind of the unique thing about our practice, that we don't really represent U.S.-based operations. Just some of the things that we do, and this is my contact information. You're welcome to email me if you want a copy of my PowerPoint today. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you for having me today.